Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming to this session. I'm Holly Clark, and I am the author of the Chromebook Infused Classroom, the Google Infused Classroom, and the Microsoft Infused Classroom. And I'm so honored to be here because Pear Deck is one of my favorite tools. And although I'm not going to be talking about Pear Deck exclusively today, I'll bring it up a little. This is really about teaching and learning in a pandemic, something that I actually, because I can't travel right now, I've gone back into a classroom on a voluntary basis, but I teach a full load of remote learning and soon to be hybrid learning. So I'm going to be showing you examples from out in the real world, what this can look like and how powerful it can be and how we can take these examples and keep them going even when the pandemic is over, which I hope is soon. So I want to say thank you for coming, and I hope that you'll tweet out anything that you learn in this session so we can have a conversation about it or put it on Instagram or, hey, go to TikTok. Just kidding. But anyway, so let's get started, and I'm so excited to be bringing this to you. So I'm going to share my screen. It's going to look weird for a second until I get there. And we're going to be talking about teaching and learning in the pandemic. And you can get to this by going to an infuse.link pandemic one. Although I will tell you, I'm really just going to be out there showing you examples. So not sure how much you'll need this, but let's get started. So first of all, you're going to hear a lot of stuff about what I'm doing with students. And I like to share that as often as I can so that people have real life examples to really sink their teeth into. So if you're interested in that, you can become more student-centered yourself and learn more about what we're trying and doing with the weekly newsletter. So if you want to sign up for that, you can go to infuselink.tips, and maybe you want to after you see some of these examples, or maybe you're already on it. So if you are, hey. Also, I mentioned that I wrote these books, and these are places where if you like what you hear, you can get in contact or, follow in the community. You won't actually be getting in contact with me, but these are some places, and you can click on those from the slides. So now we're going to talk about this idea of teaching and learning in a pandemic. And one of the first things that I want to talk about is this idea of learning loss. And we're hearing a lot about that. So I've been spending weeks doing research on learning loss. And what I've really discovered, and I still think I have a lot more to learn about, I'm learning from Harvard professors who have been looking at summer learning loss. I'm learning about a lot of things, but I need to tell you that when I'm out researching, when I find something that sounds like learning loss is a thing, it's not coming from researchers. It's coming from people who are trying to sell us some sort of program that'll help mitigate learning loss. But in my research, here's what I found. And I knew about this early on. And let me make my screen just a little bigger and there we go. I learned about this when I first read Freakonomics. And if you've read that book, you heard about the learning loss that happens during the summer. And it's a bigger loss for kids who come from lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. And that was a big thing. Now, in the research that I'm doing, they're finding that they're not able to replicate that learning loss. That actually, if a kid has some basis, some standard, so let's say in when we went into remote learning in March, if a kid learned a little bit about fractions, we'll say, that once we come back into this time period where we're teaching, whether it's remote or face-to-face, a kid has something that is called this background knowledge that they can kind of sink their teeth into and continue the learning. If you talk to teachers who are probably third grade on, most of us are not talking about the learning loss that happened in March, April, and May. In fact, in my own classroom, we're not seeing it at all. I'm not seeing anything that indicates that our students are behind. And when I read about that, we cannot replicate those earlier 1980s summer learning loss statistics, it makes me wonder. And I just want to put that out there and I'm going to be writing and doing a podcast about learning loss with a little bit more information. But we know a couple things. We know that Finland, who has the highest test scores in the world, they don't even start school until 7 years old. And for the teachers that I have talked to, the ones in kindergarten and first grade are the ones who say, yeah, there's like little sight words missing and things like that. So there's that, but then there's Finland, who doesn't even start school until age 7. And their preschool kind of stuff is all around play. Something to think about. We can't replicate the summer learning loss research, and they've tried. And so learning loss is something that I think we need to get past the fear of it and just accept that sometimes in a pandemic, in maybe a hurricane when kids are going to be learning off campus, that learning loss might not be as big of a thing as we think it is. We know that if you read the book Educated by Tara Westover, she actually was homeschooled and her father really didn't take it seriously. And she just said she didn't learn much. And then when it was time to go to college, she went and taught herself all the things she needed to get to pass the test and get into college. Well, she probably has a higher IQ than some of the kids that might suffer the most from learning loss. I think we really need to understand that less is more in some of these situations, and that deeper, like if we want to keep going with some rhyming scheme, deeper is the keeper here. We want to get at the deep learning so that kids have that foundational learning that mitigates the learning loss. So I just want to say to people out there really, really worried about that during this year of the pandemic, I don't think it's a thing. It might not be a big deal. So I haven't been able to do research about it, but I have read probably every study that's out there. And I think people are saying the same thing. Don't get fooled by the people who are trying to sell you a program that might mitigate it. Really just go back and believe in your students' ability to learn, and they will catch up. So I just want to put that out there as we start this teaching and learning in the pandemic, because that's the big thing that's hanging over all of our shoulders. So if we can agree as we go forward to look at some of the things that we're doing, and not around the idea of learning loss, but around the idea of students beginning to understand who they are as learners, taking agency over their learners in this time. So let's go look at some of those examples. But before we do, I always have to give credence to the fact that we are teaching Generation Z learners. And if you're teaching kindergarten and first grade and second grade, you're actually teaching Alpha generation. And we don't know enough about them yet. But our Generation Z learners came to us pretty tech savvy, and there are some cases where they might not know what the share button does, and we did have to teach them that, or they might need to get used to Google Classroom, whatever it is. But in general, they've never known a world without technology, without a smartphone, a tablet, a computer. And these are kids who didn't even know that there wasn't fast Wi-Fi, basically. And some people obviously don't have Wi-Fi at their home. And there are some communities where Wi-Fi is harder to get. But kids in general have had access to a phone and know how to get information, and are more tech savvy than we would have been if this happened in our generation. So we need to understand that they're ready for this challenge, and they're stepping up to the challenge. And some of them are having to go sit outside of McDonald's to get their work done. And that's nothing anyone wants to see, but they're able to do it. And so if we honor the fact that this is who these kids are, and that learning loss might not be as big of a thing as fear people based in fear want us to believe, and look at some of the things that I'm going to show you right now, maybe this is just a time when we had to pivot, and the pivot in some cases was good. I know in all cases it wasn't, trust me. So I'm going to show you some of those good pivots. But let's talk about pedagogy and digital pedagogy before we get over, because I'm going to be coming back to this idea of what digital pedagogy is. And this happens a lot I teach right now with a co-teacher, and I'm having to kind of grab her and bring her into this digital pedagogy and make her rethink some of the things, because I hear her saying, oh, it was really cool when we did this old school. And I want you to understand the power of the digital pedagogy. So we know that pedagogy means the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or concept. And digital pedagogy is that same thing, but it's building on it to bring in tools that make it more powerful, more purposeful, to give kids agency, for us to take the learning to a bigger place. So let's take, for example, if we were doing group work in the face-to-face classroom. That group does amazing things, but they never, most of the time, know what the other groups did. They might hear a group next to them, but digital pedagogy says we stop and we put something out there like Pear Deck, where kids kind of share out, or I like to use Socrative sometimes for this, where kids share out what they learned in their group, and they get to see what other groups did and how they came to a different conclusion and why. They can share that out by talking group by group, but sometimes we can't do that with all the groups that we have, or time runs short. And if we bring in a digital tool that allows us to do that, kids can learn from each other, and they can see those things even after class is gone and the group discussion has stopped. So we want to add those digital tools on. And I know we're at Parafair, but to me, Pear Deck is one of those essential tools that allows us to do this, to go from analog to digital in really powerful ways. So let's go look at how we do this. So we're going to do this with this framework that comes from the Chromebook Infused Classroom as kind of our framework for this. And so as we're getting these devices and students are on devices, a lot of teachers are thinking, what can I do with the technology? And I want you to stop. I want you to think for a second instead, what can the students do with the technology? And how do I really inspire learning? How do I inspire them to construct their knowledge, to make meaning of things without me feeding them the content, them digesting the content, and we move on? How do we get them involved in this? And this is the part I'm struggling with even the teachers that I'm working with, because they want to get the content, and we might add a tech tool or whatever, but they don't see the value in this, how this information is sprouted to the whole class now. So first thing we want to do is we want to learn at how are we going to activate curiosity. I'm going to show you this in a second. How do we allow kids to manage and keep track of their learning? And this is an ISTE standard that's really important. And that's important because they're learning to become learners this way. And how do I allow them, when we've done our projects, to apply and demonstrate their knowledge, not just ask them to answer multiple choice questions? And then how do I allow them to reflect? And it's this whole framework that I think, actually, and I don't mean to go to Pear Deck, but I always do, even when I'm not doing something for Pear Deck. Pear Deck allows me to check for understanding along the way, so that I'm doing this whole framework. But I have to know along the way if they're getting it, if what's happening. So I'm layering on some of those questions into my slide decks, into whatever I'm doing, so I get at their thinking and understanding. So let's go look at an example that is done through something called a Hyperdoc. And if you haven't seen a Hyperdoc in play before, this is what I'm using with the beginning of the school year for remote learning, where I want to help kids understand the beauty. Quite frankly, my essential question is, how do words change our lives? Instead of, and I'm teaching 8th grade language arts, instead of saying a standard, which might be students will understand the textual evidence, I want to know, and I want to help them understand the beauty of words and how it changes what we see in the stories we read, and how authors pick those words to change the way you feel. And so what we're going to do here is learn to curate really good lines. We're going to read some poems. We're going to read some short stories. And in those, we're going to curate into a Google Doc all of these lines that speak to us. Then we'll break them down and look if they're similes or what they are in the literary devices. But we're going to use this Hyperdoc to keep us organized and focused. And you can see here we have an engage and explore section. And those engage and explore sections give us that activation of curiosity. So first we go look at, and I'm going to open this actually so you can see it, this YouTube of everybody should wear sunscreen. And let me put this. It's a bunch of lines.
Enjoy the power and beauty of your youth.
Enjoy the power and beauty of your youth. So the kids watch this, and if there's lines that mean something to them, and I get them the lyrics or whatever you would call it in this case, and they grab those lines that are like, oh my gosh, yes, enjoy the power and beauty of your youth. They're not doing that. I'm looking at that like that's a good one. But there are other lines in here that speak to them, and they're grabbing those, because isn't that what language arts is about? The beauty of words, and how that's why we read books, so we can take lines from them and apply it to our life. So this is how we're activating that curiosity. They're looking at a pep talk from Kid President, who brings in some of those lines, more than one right answer, which is like this thing that they look at as well, curate. At the same time, we're reading these short stories. They're looking at those lines. We're reading this poem called If. And then we come down here and we explore our next thing that we're going to do. We're going to take these lines, and the students are going to create. And I'm using the term create because that is such an important skill right now for students to be creating things and not just sitting and taking in content. So they're going to create a manifesto. And so we look at manifestos, and then we also look at some other forms of great lines, like the lyrics for I Hope You Dance, if you remember that song. And then we are looking at really different manifestos in the explain section, and then they're going to apply that and create their own. Now, they're learning about words. We're also doing an introductory activity where we're getting to know who they are as people, because these are students I still have never met in person. And I want to know what they're like. So at the end of this, they create manifestos. And I hope this is the one without their names. Yes. So here are some examples of what these 13-year-olds created from these lines that they found. And they started after a while, starting looking for lines that really kind of went with a theme. And then they wrote about it over here. And let me just take that off. And so you can see where these kids got to create and be creative. We put it in a Google slide so that they could all see each other's. And then I'm going to come down here to a few of these examples. Actually, I'm really obsessed with Arrow's example. First of all, that her name's Arrow. That's so awesome. But look at hers. Stay weird, be curious, embrace creativity, words, and design. Here's a kid who, and you can tell by her design, is starting to find her passion. And this English assignment that I'm supposed to be doing, where kids learn to read poetry and short stories, is also turning into something more powerful, something more beautiful. I've taken, if we go back to this, I've taken their curiosity. I've allowed them to manage and keep track of their learning through this Hyperdoc, which is basically a doc with links that is made around this idea of explain, explore, and apply. And if you want to know more about Hyperdocs, you can go to hyperdocs.co. They have some free courses that you can take to get to know more about this. They apply and demonstrate their knowledge. Do I need to give them a multiple choice test to know if they understand words or and then they're going to reflect, and you're going to see that in a second. So back over at our manifestos, you can see that some of these people really got brave. This little girl is letting us know that she thinks differently, and she's proud of it. And I don't even know if it means anything more than she just is open-minded. Now, mind you, I do teach in California. We do create them a little bit more open-minded here, I think. And they hear more stories, maybe, is what I'm trying to say. But look at these beautiful, beautiful manifestos that the kids were able to not sit at a screen and be listening to a teacher and videos and then taking a forms test or a test on forms, but really creating something that they're proud of. And I've heard from parents after this that, like, these kids, even when it's time to go back, only want to go back if they can do stuff like this in their classroom. So let's look at the next step. This is where they applied and demonstrated their knowledge. So you've seen this come around. We need to get to the reflect. So we're going to head over to Flipgrid, one of my favorite reflection tools. And as you watch her tell you about her manifesto, it's the end that means everything to me. So let's listen to this.
This is Audrey, and this is my manifesto. One thing I'm proud of is how it came out. Like, I really like the quotes that I put on there because they really speak to me. Like, stop worrying so much. I need to always remember these things. And then something I change is like I use a lot of fonts. I feel like it's very busy. Next time I'd stick to like 5 main fonts. And then 3 things I learned are when you create a manifesto, you should use a simple background. I just did ocean waves, so the background doesn't really interfere with the quotes. And then I also learned how to curate lines, like quotes, and just organize it before they're put on the manifesto. Then the last thing I learned is the power.
And here it is. I'm going to put this back a minute. This is what every teacher wants to hear. The last thing I learned
is the power of words. I always knew words were meaningful, but these quotes, like I said before, really speak to me. And yeah.
Mic drop, I'm done. That's all I want as a teacher is for my kids to understand in language arts the power of words. And I want them to be able to explain that because one day they're going to need to get a job and they're going to need to be able to explain that sitting across the desk from someone who they're going to need to convince that they're the best person for the job. And they're also going to understand the value of creativity and the use of too many fonts. And this kid is ready for her future. She's learning about all of these language arts standards, but she's doing it in a way that is more powerful, if you ask me. It's more meaningful because she's putting it into her life. So we know something about pedagogy, and it's called, there needs to be transfer of knowledge. So we need to apply what we learned and put it to something new and novel. New and novel is a manifesto. So in this manifesto, she's transferring what she learned into this, creating something that speaks to her life. And so this beauty and power of words is something I know as an educator, pedagogically, she's going to take with her. And so this is what the beauty of remote and teaching in the pandemic can be, but it needs to continue past this into what we do when we get back into the classroom, because our students are going to graduate into a world of artificial intelligence. As we get 5G coming out now at new speeds, I'm getting a 5G phone today. In the next 2 years, speeds on my phone will be 600 times faster, which means that AI is going to come at us and my student needs to be able to be creative, because if robots are answering regular questions, what is the skill that's going to be needed? And it's the skill of creativity. It's the skill of empathy. And I feel like I'm doing my job here. I'm beyond doing my job because I'm getting her ready for her future. And while content is great, I've used that content to teach these other skills as well as fall in love with words. So super important. Let's head back over here and just remember we activated the curiosity. They kept track of their learning through this Hyperdoc. Could have happened in Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams. They applied and demonstrated their knowledge. And then I got to that reflective part using Flipgrid. And I got to tell you, I didn't need at any point in this to give a multiple choice question test, but I did bring in things about manifesto that I put into a slide deck that I asked them like to kind of look at the manifestos that we were looking at deeper by using Pear Deck as the way that they went off asynchronously and looked at some of that on their own. So let's go to some other examples. So we're going to head back. We're going to head over to one that, and I'm going to close these so I don't keep opening them. And we're going to look at something that's been kind of, we'll call it a bane of my existence for a long time. So I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing teachers. And not long ago, I was working with some, I believe it was 5th grade where we were doing this. We were doing a state report, and I'm going to be honest with you right now. It was like one of my favorite, best teachers that I work with. Like everything I give her technology-wise, she gets it. And she maybe was just getting tired. I don't know. And she came and she said, we're going to do a state report. And this was it. She had this all printed out when I walked into the classroom. And after hyperventilating in the corner where she couldn't see me, I looked at the bottom, and you must know where she got this from if you're a teacher. She purchased it from somewhere. But here were the questions that were being asked of the students I loved, who had become like my kids. And the population of our whatever state, area, motto, flower, bird, tree, and song. And I want you to think to yourself right now, and state gem and state food too. Awesome. Why do we ask those questions? And if you can, I want you to say it out loud. Why do we ask these questions? These right here. They seem to show up with other state reports. And I'm going to give you a second to think. Okay, now, after thinking, if you came up with the idea that these were once in the encyclopedia, you've ding, 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 got the right answer. And here we are in 2020, that was 2019, asking those same questions. Is that digital pedagogy, or is that doing the same thing and adding a really cool clip art at the top? So what could it look like? So what I did is I went out and I went to Teachers Pay Teachers too, because I wanted to see what's out there. How did she get to this? And I found one on Google Slides, and I want to go past, I want to go here. And what I found was a Google slide that had the exact same thing. It was just colored. We just colored it. We made it look pretty. And that's not digital pedagogy. This is not the same thing. State motto, state nickname, state flowers, state trees, state birds, state animals sound familiar? And students can come and add their text here. It's a worksheet. And so what we need to do is think about what would be more powerful. We live in a world where there's VR. We live in a world where we have 360 images. What could be more powerful? So let me show you an example of the next iteration of something like this, something that kids can do in a remote environment, they can do in a face-to-face environment, but takes them to this new digital pedagogy. So here's an example from one of my students. We used an app called Tour Creator VR that's put out by Google. And because we do have VR sets, what I wanted them to create was a virtual tour of their state. I can't show you that virtual tour inside of a cardboard because of the fact, obviously, that we don't have that together, but I can show you what it looks like, and you can just picture what it would look like if you had it inside of a VR. So here we are. And it'll take a second to open. And here is that student's report. And I put it on my account so that I could show you this. But you can see she's added her intro paragraph, California, Here We Come, which if you're from California, you know that's our state song. And I let her use California. Other teachers are like, nope, got to choose another state. I'm not that. Well, I want her to love the state she's doing, because really what we're getting at is what makes a state interesting, what makes a state unique. And she wanted to do California, and I have no problem with that. A trip, here we come, a trip to the most populated state in the country, a place where you can start your morning on the highest peak in the continental US and end by surfing a wave at sea level. Interesting. So she really got at making it interesting, but here we go. Here's what this looks like. Now picture yourself inside of a VR, and you're looking around at our state capitol building and looking around at what the grounds look like because you can't be there. And she's found an image. Not only has she found an image, but aren't state reports about writing and research and writing your paragraphs? So here's her paragraph. In this state capitol building in downtown. Oh, wait, I don't have to read this to you because she's recorded herself, so that when you're on the tour in VR, you can listen to her explain where you are. So let's just listen for a second to that. Oh, and she found a way to put our state song in the background. That's who Gen Z learners are. I didn't ask them to do that. I thought it would be too tough. They figured it out on their own.
Yeah, here I come, right back where I started from.
This is the state capitol building in downtown Sacramento. Sacramento became the capital because of its close location to the gold rush, which happened in the nearby foothills of the Sierra Nevada.
Now, if you're not impressed right now, I don't know how I would impress you. So here she is at the Capitol building. She does the same thing with downtown San Francisco, or really an overlook at what I believe is probably Twin Peaks, looking out at the San Francisco Bay talking about it.
In this scene, we are looking out over the San Francisco Bay Area, which quickly became an important trading center following the gold rush and the home of many Chinese immigrants who would help build the
Wow. Even when I watch this, some of these, I get really, really excited because this is some good stuff. And I've seen this a million times. So she does downtown San Francisco in the Transamerica building. You get to actually be there, Napa Valley, which is one of our richest fertile regions, and you can see what it looks like. If you are not from Napa Valley, we'll take you over to Stanford University, one of our famous universities. Lake Tahoe, look at this one. She found some people who did a 360 image while parasailing. You can see the size of this enormous lake and how beautiful it is. This is the kind of thing that is not happening here. Take that in for a second. There's power in this new digital pedagogy. There's power in that. Kids are going to come and be excited to go on this tour with VR. And all I had were cardboard VR sets that I actually think I bought on Amazon for $4.99 each. And we had one at each table. And you would come and you would go to Hawaii. Or we had a lot of kids who chose California. They wanted to know more about their state. And I had no problem with that. She went to Yosemite, which is, we've got a good state here to do it. Maybe that's why. Downtown LA, Palm Springs, the best city, San Diego. Oh, and if I didn't mention, that's where I'm from. Our Coronado Island and the Mission San Diego de Acala. We have 21 California missions here, which are an important part of our history. So this is the kind of thing. There's no mention of the bird. I don't even know my state bird. Someone told me the other day when I was giving a presentation, and I've been I've gotten by really well in life. Someone said it was a quail, which seems interesting to me. I don't know. I didn't even Google it because I don't care. And neither do kids. And maybe a kid who does will put the state bird in theirs. But this is what technology can look like when we do these kinds of things correctly. I want to also show you an example of something that we've been doing as we're learning about words. And we did those short stories. And so we had kids also interacting with stories. We were in Google Meet and, oops, I didn't get you the right one with their examples, but let me erase this. Someone accidentally, that can happen. This is a Jamboard where the kids are using this to show us the parts of a story as we go through it. So we read a story, they come in here, they talk about the exposition and the character and the setting, they find the conflict, and then the rising action, and they come in here and they actually type it. Okay, the rising action was when the landlady opened the door and whatever it is, okay? And they fill these out. But here's the beauty of this. And this is where the digital pedagogy comes in. And this is the part I'm struggling with teachers understanding. As kids do this, in general, there's more slides than this, and they're all working on them together. By the way, in a Jamboard, these are called frames and not slides. But as they work on them, they are able to see other kids' answers. And they can compare their answer with the answer of another kid. And when they do that, they're thinking about thinking. They're thinking about their thinking based on the other kid's thinking. And they are able to go into a state of metacognition. And in this state of metacognition, that's what we want. And I'm struggling to get people to understand that kids need to see each other's ideas, and we want period 2 to see what period 4 wrote, because they might look at some of the answers and say to themselves, I had never thought about it that way. That's interesting. I want to show you another example of teaching and learning in the pandemic. This did not happen actually, and I'm going to just come here during the pandemic, but we've used this inside of the pandemic because we were already ready for this. And so if I come over to Seesaw, which is also a really good app, and we go to this short story unit here. Oh, I don't want that one, sorry. I want Invictus. So we were reading about a poem again. And we were reading about Invictus, and this was happening in a school that I help out in Oklahoma. And I wanted to know what the kids actually really learned about Invictus. And so I went to Seesaw to have them draw pictures of what one stanza meant to them. So in an Invictus, they have 4 stanzas, and I said, pick the one that really speaks to you. And then I want you to either highlight or circle the 4 words in that stanza that really bring meaning. Again, falling in love with words. And then draw a picture of what that means to you. But what becomes really important is this idea that kids are going to press record in the way that they did on Flipgrid with their manifestos and tell me about their learning. What does this mean? So this little girl, did the stanza, it matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. And this is a really important poem over time, because this is the one that Nelson Mandela, when he was in Robben Island for 27 years, used to think about every day, that kept him going. And so we're going to ask her to tell us what this means to her. Let's look here.
In my image, I take punishment as a way that you can physically and verbally hurt.
So she needs some work with the verbally, but she's explaining what this means. Had I just done this and not asked kids to explain their thinking, that's where I fail in the digital world. I need to use the digital pedagogy of, and I like to just use a simple term called press record. Press record and have students explain their thinking and have them tell me what it is that this means to them. Because without that step, I don't know why they drew that. Okay, that's great. Well, you picked a good stanza. You got some good words. Yeah, you picked the right words. But what does it mean to you? And that's one of the powerful things about having modules set up in Pear Deck also, that allows me to have them respond to show me which way they're leaning with the draggable option, to show me things like answer questions, and I can put all of their answers up on the screen, and we can use that as a discussion point. Another thing, and here is a way that we were using Pear Deck that I really like. So now we're going to start a reading unit. And this could be a science unit. It could be a math unit on the quadratic equation. And in a regular classroom, we would have stations maybe. But now I need these stations to be, I need them to be able to be done remotely. And when I'm back in hybrid, I need them to be able to be done by kids who are still at home and kids who are in my class. And so using Google Sites, I made these learning stations, and we only have 3 right now. Let me go ahead and put it into the published site. And we only have 3 right now because I'm going to add more later. But here they come, and they are coming over here, and I'm taking them to a Wakelet where I have added some videos that have instructions. And so I'm using another tool for organizational purposes that I soon will be having them use more. And of course, it's not opening. Here we go. Looks like it's going to open now. A lot of kids are on it. So station 1, they're going to watch these 3 videos. That's great. And a lot of kids, once we start talking about Hitler and the Holocaust, they want to know more. So I always keep a little want to know more videos attached there. And if we head back over here, now they're going to go over to their Jamboard video or Jamboard and answer this question. And let me see if I can, I'll show you what this Jamboard looks like. And this is what I'm going to have them do using Jamboard. And this way I can look and see what they're getting done. Now, this is not one that they're actually doing right now. This is one that's my template. But I'm going to ask them, as they interact with those videos, to write on here the 4 things they learned that helped Hitler come to power. And then you can see there's slides for all the kids working in groups, working in breakout rooms, to fill these out and they can see each other's. Let's head back over though to this thing. Then they're going to go watch a video, look at his body language, and use Padlet this time to tell me what they learned. Let's go. Let's see if we can click on this and see what they put, because they were doing it today, except for they have their last names. So I'm going to go away from that. I got to get them to stop putting their last names. But they were responding, and that was just an hour ago, to what they thought about his body language, because we don't know what he's saying because he's speaking German, but he's going at, getting all crazy. Well, crazy is not, I guess it's the right word, but I don't want to put that word into anyone's mouth because I want them to figure out if they think that's crazy on their own. But here we go. We're going to look at understanding anti-Semitism, and we're also going to watch some videos. But they're going to show their understanding using a module that I made in Pear Deck. So I asked some questions in Pear Deck and they respond. And so I'm trying to use this asynchronous form of learning to really get at what they took away from this. And later they're going to take all of this and make it into a timeline. So they're going to have access to that Pear Deck later on as well. And then station 3 going in here, and then they go to Flipgrid to tell us really what happened. What are these pogroms, and what happened in the night of Crystal Mountain? What did that do to the change the daily lives of Jews after that? So these are some ways that we're doing those remote learning experiences, and they are interacting with it. But the most important part, and the part I want you to take away from, because anyone could make these remote learning stations, is that the kids, when they're responding, are getting to see what the other kids think too. And it's not just the 2 people in their group. Group work alone now in 2020 is not enough. You need to see outside of your groups, because you guys might have all come to a consensus, or you might be thinking certain things, and then you see what another group says, and you might be like, oh, that was interesting. I can grow from learning that. I can see that also we were on the wrong track, or I can see that we really had great answers and did exactly what was expected of us. So there are all of these great things that we can do in this teaching and learning in a pandemic if we go back to this idea that we must first, in a face-to-face classroom, in a remote classroom, in a hybrid or concurrent model, we've got to activate student curiosity first. We've got to have this overarching essential question that is with us, that how do words impact our lives? Not, students will be able to find textual evidence. Yes, they will. We're going to do that. But really, what do words do to change our lives? That's the essential question. We want to give them that activity in something that's easy for them to maneuver. And Google Classroom allows us to do that too. If I go over here and show you Google Classroom today, and let me see if it'll come up. It might not. Yeah, I'm going to bring this over, and hopefully you can see this screen. But I'm going to go to, and this is them working on these, by the way, so you can see that they're getting them done. They can see each other's. Since they're, I need to go away from that because you can see their names. But when we come over here to this learning stations, you can see that I'm putting this all together so that they can keep track and manage their learning correctly. And while these are also, these Jamboards and Flipgrids are also on that site, I want them to be all in one place that later they can find them. So this is an important thing, is that we understand how to do this effectively for our kids, especially for our kids who have learning difficulties or executive functioning. This really helps everyone have more success. And when we allow kids to talk about their learning, to apply and demonstrate it and put it into a new and novel situation, like a manifesto, we're solidifying that learning. And I have a lot of people who ask, how do we lock down our screens? I just had that last week. How do we lock down the screen so we know the kids aren't cheating during a test? Well, my kids aren't taking tests like that, because I know along the way, by using Pear Deck and by using Flipgrid and things like this, that I know where my kids are in the thinking process. I'm watching them do, as they're doing it, their Jamboard. I'm helping them correct mistakes before it's too late, before they've done a bunch of wrong answers and now they feel like they didn't get it and they're not that good of a learner. That's not it at all. They just needed someone in real time to help them. And I can do that when I'm using things like Jamboard, when I'm using things like Pear Deck to correct misconceptions so that we can all be successful. And then giving them this opportunity to reflect on their learning, which is so, so important. So if we head back, one of the things that we want to also understand and that Pear Deck allows us to do, and Flipgrid and Seesaw, is that we want to make student thinking visible. You saw that with the Flipgrid I showed you of a student. You saw that when you went to California with me. They're thinking about things, they're visible. And we're getting to hear from every student, not just the one student in the group who convinced everyone else that that's the way they should think. And when they share their work, they learn best from each other. So these are just some of the examples that make teaching and learning in a pandemic so fabulous, because we can now take these things that we were able to accomplish and apply them into a face-to-face classroom and ask ourselves again, and I'm going to go back to that other slide, not what can we do. Let me just head over here. I'll do it this way. Not what can we do with the technology, but what can we allow the students to do? You know, when we did these manifestos, and I closed the manifesto here. I can go back to it really quickly. It's the beauty of having all this up. Let me just go to recent. You'll see how I manage my my drive. And when I open this, you're going to see that these students learned another tool here too, the tool of Canva, which is how they learned to create this. And I see all these commercials on TV where all of these designers are using Canva to do their jobs. They're also know now how to do it. And they feel super successful. And the stories that are coming out of projects like this are just amazing to me. And this little girl, with her, I play like a girl and that's how I win. Like, yes, that's what I want. So I hope seeing some of these inspiring examples of what remote learning, and now we can bring these into face-to-face learning, how we can really rethink that kids need to play with this information. They need to synthesize it into something new and novel and have that transfer of knowledge. And that is what these digital pedagogies are all about, is understanding that we can bring in the metacognition in a way that we've never done before. We can use press record to get at student assessment. Rather than just having kids do something on a Google Doc, we're asking them to tell us about the learning journey, to explain what they learned, why they learned it, why it's important. Because when a student can tell you what they've learned it. And so I hope that these were powerful examples, and that that they inspire you to see that through something as simple as a Hyperdoc and creativity, we're able to still do those same standards that we always did. And instead of going along the surface, we're going deeper. We're getting at better. We're helping them understand themselves as learners, and we're sending them into a state of metacognition. So I just want to make sure that I didn't forget anything. Let's look over here on the side to make sure that we've got at all of that. And we have. So now that you've seen examples, go out and do. Bring in Jamboard, bring in Pear Deck, bring in Canva, and start to allow your students to create, and then check for their understanding along the way, and allow them to apply and demonstrate that knowledge. And the really important word there is apply. Apply it to something new and novel. And that's where we have the transfer of knowledge. And without that application, we stop short of the full learning cycle. So, and that apply can even happen in this reflection part. But hopefully that was helpful. Lots of these examples in the Chromebook Infused Classroom book. But thank you, everyone. And thanks for joining me. And I can't wait for you to hear and see your tweets about anything that inspired you. I love the work these kids have done, and I hope it was a good example for y'all. Okay, everyone. Thank you. And thanks so much.